Ah shit, here we go again. Welcome back to GTAudio, my series where I make a bracket out of every single radio station featured across the entire Grand Theft Auto series, a major influence on my musical tastes throughout my life, and I'm sure on plenty of you as well. And I take every single song, rank them in a bracket of my own devising, and ask you, the voting public, to then vote on which is the best song, after which I then declare that the winner of each radio station and eventually pit them all against each other sometime before I die. That being said, there are over 105 radio stations throughout the entire series, and we haven't even gotten to GTA 6 yet. So, if you're just now joining us, we are in our third overall contest, this time dealing with Wave 103 from the first Grand Theft Auto Vice City game, as opposed to the Wave 103 track list that shows up in GTA Vice City Stories for the PSP, which is a different track listing altogether. I'd argue possibly even a better one, but that's up for you all to decide. Anyway, we are officially done with our first round of the voting, in which we pitted 16 songs up against each other, mostly fitting the new wave genre with a few divergences here and there. But anyway, let's get into it and see what you all decided beats what, and who is going to advance to our Elite 8 round. First up, we had our first seeded song, which is the iconic Cars by Gary Newman versus Pale Shelter by Tears for Fears. Just as a recap of last week, the way that I seeded these was usually according to chart performance as well as how well known the song was in the United States, because that's where I am, and just a general combination of those factors. So in this case, Pale Shelter, because it did not chart in the US, it ended up being seated at the bottom. Gary Newman handily beat Tears for Fears 5-2, with 7 votes reporting overall. Second up, we had Poison Arrow by ABC up against Gold by Spandau Ballet, two artists which I'd argue sound very similar to each other, two, I guess you'd call it baritone voices in the British new wave or possibly new romantic tradition. Poison Arrow beat out Gold again by 5-2. Personally, I just think Poison Arrow is catchy as hell, so we'll see how that goes in the next round when it goes up against Cars. We had a very tight contest in the next one here. We had Kids in America by Kim Wilde, which you may know from the Johnny Neutron soundtrack, versus Hyperactive by Thomas Dolby, which I think maybe only got the votes that it did because I was forced to perform an a cappella version of it last time around, simply because otherwise I would face a copyright strike if I used the original audio. Kim Wilde beat out Thomas Dolby 4-3. Next up, we have Obsession by Animotion, is featured in the Maxine trailer, and also the theme for Saturday Night Wrestling from the WWF, which was before my time, but I learned it through Matt McCarthy's videos. Go check him out if you haven't. Versus Love My Way by the Psychedelic Furs, another song which I was forced to perform a cappella. And again, we see a very thin, razor-thin margin here. Animotion beats out the Psychedelic Furs, also 4-3. Kids in America will face Obsession in our next round. Next up, I Ran So Far Away by Flock of Seagulls versus Love Missile F-111 by Sig Sig Sputnik, and I am just so happy that Sig Sig Sputnik, whose album is prominently featured on my living room wall, actually managed to get a single vote this time, which is probably honestly more than they deserve. I don't know, I like them, don't at me. Flock of Seagulls does carry this round with 6 of the votes. Keep Feeling Fascination by the Human League versus Atomic by Blondie. I absolutely detested Keep Feeling Fascination, but I do not vote in these rounds, so my hands are completely tied here. This was another song where I was forced to perform a cappella, and oh boy, that was an experience. But fortunately, good old Americans, Blondie, came to our rescue this time. Blondie beat out the Human League 4-3 this time around. And so they will go on to face Iran next time around. We're on to our last two now. 99 Luftballons by Nena, the German version, versus Never Say Never by Romeo Void. One of my favorites, actually. I have that album. Probably one of the more punky songs in this entire bracket, but it's hard to go up against a powerhouse, and Nena is no different here. Nena gets 5 versus 2 for Romeo Void, meaning that she will go on the next round to face our final contender. So finally, we had Sunglasses at Night by Coy Hart versus Two Tribes by Frankie Goes to Hollywood, both very emblematic of the 80s for very different reasons. Ultimately, the Canadian superstar Corey Hart, with his sunglasses, beats Frankie Goes to Hollywood by a margin of 6-1. And that is our first round. For those of you who didn't keep track over the last couple of minutes and maybe fell asleep to what I was saying here, we have Cars by Gary Newman versus Poison Arrow by ABC, Kids in America by Kim Wilde versus Obsession by Animotion, I Ran So Far Away by A Flock of Seagulls versus Atomic by Blondie, and 99 Luftballons by Nena versus Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart. All right, this is going to be an exciting matchup. I feel like there's going to be a lot of broken hearts this next round, depending on how the voting goes. But I thank you so much for joining me for all this, my weird little experiment, my weird little obsession over the last couple of years, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Ordinarily, in the comments, I have been asking people to vote for their next favorite radio station they want to see. I think I'm actually going to pick a random one this time around just so we get a little bit of variety, because so far we seem to be skewing a lot towards the Vice City games, and a good majority of the music, it does actually come from GTA 4, GTA 5, and there's some lesser known stuff in there as well. I just want to see variety, because a lot of these songs, especially the ones in Vice City and to some extent San Andreas, I grew up listening to. They really influenced my musical taste, but part of this whole show for me is also finding about new songs I might not have listened to the first time around when I played this back when I was in college or high school or something, and maybe I'll find a new favorite song out there. I don't know. I mean, this bracket is how I discovered Bronski Beat, so for whatever reason. So you never know. There's a lot of great surprises there. Also, I apologize for my new baby-faced look. I had to do this for work, so hopefully the beard will be back in full force. Again, thank you so much for riding the wave with me. And I think I'll call this bracket probably Wednesday the 25th, if I can squeeze in a recording and editing and get all this up. So that should give you a little over a week to decide between these 8 songs. Either way, I hope you have a great time now that Fascination is finally off the bracket. Don't at me. And look forward to hearing from you all. Thanks, and have a great week.